Joining our latest open meeting. And can I start by thanking all of you, both on the Zoom and on the live stream. Thank you again, as I do for every one of these meetings, for all of your ongoing hard work and commitment, both on and off campus throughout this period. I'm going to say a few things at the outset about the What Works survey results and the staff pulse survey results. And then I'm going to hand over to Professors Nalan Thacker and Anis Esmail, who are going to talk a bit about safe ways of working on campus. I know this is a very important issue for colleagues right across the university. And we had a very good discussion about this at Senate recently, where Nalan and Anis contributed significantly to that discussion. And we felt it would be really good to repeat it here for all of our colleagues across PS. So they will do a piece on safe ways of working. And as with all of our presentations, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask any questions at the end of their presentation. That will then be followed by Simon Merriwest, who's going to talk about where we are now with the Student Experience Programme and the work that's been done so far throughout the summer and when we will be announcing plans for the future. And then we'll have a very quick update from Richard Cotton on the enormous amount of work that Richard has been leading on to secure flights into Manchester to help our international students who want to be on campus in the new semester to actually be able to get onto campus. So those are the main topics that we'll talk about today. And then hopefully, well, not hopefully, there will be time at the end for any other questions that you want to ask of me or any of my PSLT colleagues. So can I remind you, as usual, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. If you don't get an opportunity to ask a question today, please remember you can email me at registrar@manchester.ac.uk at any time, and I or a colleague from PSLT will be in touch to respond to your query. And also, any questions that you post on the chat function that if we don't get to in the time that we have available this morning, we will come back to you offline and make sure that we respond to your query. Okay, so as you all know, we undertook a What Works survey of colleagues across the university recently, and we had a fantastic response to that survey. The highlights are now published on StaffNet, and we are working to publishing the detailed results on StaffNet as well for all of you who are interested in looking at them. But just to give you a flavor of what the What Works survey told us, what the outputs were from colleagues across the university, you won't be surprised, I guess, to hear that many staff have benefited from flexible working, both the location and hours and days of the week of when they have been able to undertake their work. There's a very strong preference coming out of the survey for a blended approach to working going forward, with a preferred model around spending 2 or 3 days a week at home and the remainder on campus. I think this is going to be quite a key component of our approach to how we can build back better in the future, how we take the positive opportunities that have come out of the COVID pandemic and integrate them into our ways of working. You could say, why haven't we done this before? Actually, I would say that we've been talking about this for a long time. We've had flexible policies in our university, but we've been inconsistent perhaps in how we've approached them around the university. But we've clearly, through the past 6 months, really learned together what the really positive opportunities there are for both the university and for us as individuals through a more blended approach to how we work in future. Having said that, colleagues, through lockdown have missed the face-to-face interactions and would like to have some opportunities to work on campus part of the week, to spend time with colleagues and to collaborate and co-create. Some colleagues have said to me they felt they've lost that sense of creativity that comes from interactions, informal and otherwise, with colleagues. And we need to make sure that we don't lose those opportunities in the future. Staff have been very impressed by how quickly they and the university have adapted to new ways of doing things. talking about feeling trusted and empowered by their managers to work in new ways. Having said that, many cite a lack of IT and other equipment as an issue which makes working from home on a long-term basis more challenging. And that's something that we will be looking at for the longer term. They also felt that there are inconsistencies across the university in terms of how decisions are made, the processes for getting tasks completed, and most markedly in the way that line managers have supported their staff during lockdown. Staff also feel that there are more processes which could be moved online at a quicker pace, and that there is still far too much bureaucracy involved in getting things done, with lengthy forms to complete, complex sign-off procedures, etc. There's also some evidence that a two-track approach to some processes is developing, with one process for staff back working on campus and another for those remaining at home. Some staff, as we've seen, are also suffering with poor mental health or well-being issues, whilst others have physical issues due to the suboptimal working from home arrangements that are in place for them. So we've shared all of these findings with SLT, with PSLT, with the Foresight Group, and also with the Employee Programme Board, and it will help inform decisions that we take about how we're going to work differently in the future. So thank you so much to everybody who contributed. We also took a staff pulse survey. And again, we got a very good response rate from colleagues in the university. So thank you for that. The highlights indicate that the majority of staff feel that they have been kept informed and engaged on important issues by SLT, by local leadership, and by their line managers. I think events like this, having our open meetings on Zoom, colleagues have discovered that in many ways they're better than the old face-to-face approaches that we had in lecture theatres in the past. And so that's translated into a feeling that colleagues have felt that they are kept more regularly informed, even where maybe we don't have the answers. At least they feel that we've shared that with them. There have been issues with how colleagues feel about how much they've been told about what to expect in terms of a return to campus. And I think that was fair at the time that we undertook the survey. A lot more information has been issued now, and there's more coming out again this week on what colleagues should expect in terms of what the on-campus experience will look like and what expectations are being set of all of us in the weeks to come as we enter into the first semester. And finally, the majority of colleagues felt that they had been able to work effectively during this period, which is really good news. So those are the highlights from two surveys that we've recently undertaken. If you'd like to understand more about what the feedback was from colleagues, then please do look on StaffNet, where you will find more of that detail. So I'm going to hand over to Nalan and Anis now, and they're going to talk a bit about safe ways of working on campus, and we'll take some Q&A when they're finished. So Nalan, I think you're going to start us off.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today. I think Anis is online. I can't see him, but I'm presuming he is. I'll just briefly go through a couple of slides, just talk generally about about safe ways of working, and then leave most of the time for questions, and Anis and I can field those questions. Anis, as you know, is professor in medicine and is a GP as well, so he's right at the coalface and will be able to sort of provide some sort of feedback from the coalface, as it were. So in terms of safe ways of working, we really have to start with the idea that we all have shared responsibility for looking after each other, our families and our communities, because health and safety is everybody's responsibility. And even if we individually might not be at high risk, the people we live with or the people we interact with in our communities may be. So we really have to behave like not only as responsible for ourselves, but for the people, other people that we interact with. I would ask you to read and follow the guidance very carefully. It's fairly simple, what we're asking people to do to keep safe and keep others safe. You should understand how COVID-19 spreads. It's mainly through aerosol, respiratory droplets, and by contact. So we know how it spreads, so we know we can avoid transmission, or how we can avoid transmission. You need to understand if you personally are vulnerable to a more severe COVID-19 infection, and if you are, you should discuss this with your healthcare provider as well, so your GP, and then with your line manager. If you feel that the nature of your work means that you are likely to be at a higher risk. I'm sorry, I just realized my video was off. I apologize. Thank you for nudge, Patrick. I apologize. It's important that you do flag up if you have concerns about your vulnerability to more severe COVID-19 infection. And there's a clear guidance for line managers on how to help you with this. And then finally, if you get symptoms, or you've been in contact with somebody who has tested positive or has symptoms, then we ask you to engage with the NHS Test and Trace service and follow their guidance on this. If I can go on to the sort of next slide there. In terms of on the campus, what would you expect to see? You will see that we have mandated 2 meters social distancing on the campus. There was a lot of debate about it. Patrick knows about it. Some universities were working at 1 meter plus. Government sort of said 1 meter plus is fine. We've gone for 2 meter social distancing. We know that difference between 1 and 2 meters is anywhere between 2 and 10-fold. So we've taken the option of going for the most safe way of working, which is 2 meter social distancing. That clearly reduces the amount of activity we can do on the campus. So we know that with that sort of 2 meter social distancing, our occupancy of the campus, our capacity to sort of cope with that is about 20% on the campus. So we can't have any more people on the campus if we're going to have to maintain that level of social distancing. We've also mandated that you should wear a face covering correctly, and I think this is important. You often see people walking around with their nose exposed and the face mask is acting like a chin guard. We're saying wear it correctly. We're going to provide you with 2 high quality washable face coverings, and there will be exemptions for people with certain medical conditions, and there will be exemptions in certain areas. And there is an FAQ being developed that will be available for you. And of course, there is a requirement for wearing face coverings if you're using public transport. We've installed hand sanitizer stations right across the campus. I think we've done about 2,000, and we will install more if it's necessary. If we observe that pinch points there's not enough sort of access to hand sanitizers, we will put in more as necessary. So that you will see when you come in that buildings are completely covered with these hand sanitizers at every entrance, exit, and floors and so on. We would advise you to avoid touching high contact areas. What does that mean? Well, if you can open the door with your elbow, do that rather than trying to touch it, or make sure your hands are clean before you actually touch any high contact areas. There are other things on the campus, like toilets are all designated as single use. We are trying to get the disabled facilities just dedicated for disabled staff, so nobody else sort of goes in, so they have a clear priority over there. And the other things we're asking people to do is to clean their working areas with alcohol. We'll provide wipes for everybody before you start work and after you finish. And then some just general advice about don't hang around the workplace, don't socialize in workplace, don't stagger your breaks so you're not crowding common areas like kitchens and so on. And we've said so far that have meetings online. I think I'll stop there and just allow more time for questioning. Anise, do you want to add anything, Anise?
No, just to, I mean, I think it is obviously, I can imagine that a lot of people are concerned, and the amount of conflicting advice that is coming out of the media just confuses everyone, really. And I just emphasize what Nayland says. I mean, I think that this has been planned for quite some time, and there are a group of us who've been involved in different ways, and I can say I'm very confident that a lot of the things have been thought through. It's really, I mean, it's a credit to all of you, I think, that you have all been working together to work out what the best ways to begin to start opening. And as Nayland says, it's going to be very limited. And I think it's just important to recognize that we are going to have problems. No one is saying that with COVID rising across the country, with large people coming back into Manchester, we will get these outbreaks. But that does not represent a failure of what we've planned for. It is partly what's going to happen. And I think even on that side, I'm confident that the sort of communication side of things and the public health messaging that will go out will be important, and I think has been thought through. And also in terms of the sort of testing, I think Nelly didn't mention, but it's been negotiated to have a testing center on Denmark Road, so it'll be easily accessible. So I think by adopting the common sense public health principles, we will succeed in getting the campus open again. And I think, I've had to been working. I'm a GP, and we've been open all through the pandemic. And initially, it was very, very strict, but we're seeing patients again, and we have managed to contain. We have a large health centre, the largest in Manchester. We're still seeing patients, some of them who are ill, and we have succeeded through simple social distancing, hand washing, face masks. We have not had any spread, although one member of staff did contract COVID from the community. It didn't spread to anyone in the building, and she was working as a nurse. So these things do work, and I think we should be confident that we have gone through as much as is possible. So, whilst no one is guaranteeing that we won't get many outbreaks, I think things are in place now, and we should take confidence in the work that's being done. So I hope that's right. And as Nayland says, we'll take questions and try and deal with them if we can.
Thank you, Anise.
Thanks, Anise, and thanks, Nalan, as well. So now's your opportunity. If you want to ask a question, please raise your blue hand, or if you want to ask a question through the chat function, you can do it that way as well. So there don't appear to be any questions at the moment. Anise, I think your point is really important, that there's a lot of this conflicting information out there in the media, and it's been really helpful to see the guidance that's been developed within the university, which has taken and continues to take a safety first approach throughout in all of our planning for our return to campus and for teaching on campus in the new year. Okay, so we've got some questions on. Got a question about parking. Can I come back to that maybe later on when we do the general Q&A, if that's okay? Trevor might remind me. Kate Hilton is asking whether there'll be any updates to the fire evacuation procedures. Presumably 2 meter social distancing will be extremely difficult during fire evacuation. Nalan, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think at that point, you just have to have your mask on, your face covering on, and you will be in an emergency situation less than 2 meters, but it's important to get you out of the building at that point. The risk from the fire, if there is a fire, is greater to you than any risk from COVID.
Good. John Walker says, thanks for a great update. You mentioned 20% capacity. Is that staff and students, Nalan? Could you expand on it a little bit, please?
So it's 20% occupancy of the campus. So yes, so if you look at the way we've planned teaching, all the students will be spaced 2 meters apart as well. Now, people often think of 2 meters apart, sort of side by side, but actually it's in all directions. So you reduce the capacity dramatically. So you take a lecture theatre that's got 400-500 seating capacity, and you can maybe only fit about 60 people in there at the most if you're pushing it. Some of our biggest lecture theatres, you will get that sort of capacity by the time you allow for that 2 meter radius sort of clear zone around them. But once you do that, the risk is low. I think that's the key thing to stress.
Fine, that's good, thank you. This is a question for Chris Pressler. Chris, I'll come back to you for an answer on this in a moment, but a colleague is asking about how the decisions have been made to change all the charges in the library. You might want to come back on that in a moment.
Do you want me to deal with it now, Patrick?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
We're not. You can see how the tech is working here. I'm speaking to Katie directly on the phone, who's also on this call. Thank you for the question. Neither of us quite understand it, to be absolutely honest. Is the questioner also, because you're using numbers, we don't know who you are? Is the questioner talking about library fines? If so, we don't really charge fines.
All right. If we don't know what the question is, let's leave it to the question to come back with a more specific question, if that's okay. Let me move on to John Warren, who's asking, Nalan, do we have a consistent approach for the signs that we're putting up on campus? There appears to be an almost departmental building level of sign type and no specific templates such as face coverings or social distancing.
No, I've worked. I don't know if Jane is on here, but we've actually gone through all the signs that have, and we're only supposed to be using the standard signs. So we will share them with everyone to use. I know the council's also asking us to use their signs as well. They're going to send some to us, but we are trying to sort of stick to our corporate sort of signage on the campus.
Okay, good. Julie Teague asks quite a long question. I'll try and summarize it. I'm actually reading these questions out because for colleagues on live streaming, they don't see the chat function, so they're not able to see the question that's being asked. So for colleagues who can read the chat function, bear with me while I repeat the question. So Nalan, Julie's asking, says, when campus reopens for students, are academic teaching staff then permitted to use their offices for any related teaching work? And as the building doors will be opened, how will this be monitored so reduced capacity on campus is maintained? And will each office require a certificate displayed? And can this be produced locally rather than by the corporate group?
Yes, I mean, if I can answer the last question, that will have to be managed locally, not in fact, we're not signing off every single space individually. It's signed off at the school level. We're providing the framework, and if there are specific questions relating to individual spaces, but we've delegated that to the head of school for sign off ultimately for each individual space. In terms of staff being able to use, it's unreasonable to say if a staff's got several teaching sessions through the day, to say you can't remain on the campus during that time. They have to be able to use their office. So as long as they're not sharing the office, or if they are sharing a large office, there must be 2 meters social distancing. And, you should be able to use the office at that point.
I think I'd make the point that that you can't legislate for every eventuality. And this is the point about the principles that Nalin espoused. I think, you've got to just, it's not fair to say you have to rely on common sense, but we know the principles. So provided you follow those principles, you minimize the risk significantly and your exposure significantly as well. So these are all very, very important. So, people are going to have to make decisions on their own sometimes and on the roof. So I think that's important to emphasize.
That is a really important point, because people are often coming back to the central group saying, can we do this? Can we do that? Actually, the framework tells you what you should be able to do. And then a lot of the decisions are delegated locally, because they have to be. We can't anticipate every single situation. And I know when we had our operational group meeting, Vicky, you said the same thing, that it's difficult to sort of anticipate for every line manager every possible situation they will face. But there are principles in place that you should be able to apply. And I know it's difficult, but it's difficult for all of us. I think I said it at the heads meeting last week. None of us has managed through a pandemic before. So we're all learning, and it's like working on shifting sands here. There is, the situation's changing day to day. What applies last week doesn't apply this week, because we're in different ballpark now. So I think we need to just be aware that we will have to make sort of reasonable judgments at a local level.
I mean, in all honesty, the difficulty is going to be with our students. I think the staff are going to understand this and everything else, but it's very difficult with a large group of 18-year-olds to manage this. And again, the public health message to them, will have to be consistent, and we just hope that they will follow it. And I think the majority of people are doing it. So we always get the stuff in the media about how irresponsible young people are. But I mean, as I said, if I look around the surgery and I look at parents ringing us up and so on, I think the vast, overwhelming majority of people are aware of these issues and are willing to go along with it, because they know that it helps, because they themselves have live in households where they might have elderly people and so on. So I think people are responsible. But it'll be difficult when a huge number of people are coming on campus, and part of what we encourage is for them to meet other students. So, but provided that they adopt these principles, then we should be okay. But we won't avoid an outbreak, that I can say. But it'll be managed well when it happens.
Great, thank you. Thanks both. Somebody asked whether the signage might be in different languages. Nalan, do you want to answer that one?
We did think about it, but we expect everybody who comes to the university to have a basic level of English understanding. Simon, I see you nodding your head, but we did talk about this, and we didn't feel that this was necessary.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Okay, so John asked about university policy in relation to enforcement and policing these measures, Nalan. Is there going to be a reporting escalation procedure for breaches?
Yeah, so I think that's just through normal line management, really. We don't want to put in special measures and special marshals in place to monitor it. It just has to be through the standard management procedures, that if there is repeated sort of failure of following the rules, then the management sort of escalates it to normal routes. I don't want to necessarily sort of start putting in special policing measures and so on, because I think we have to trust our staff to do the right thing, and I think they will. It'd be just impossible to sort of have people policing areas and so on. What we are going to do is ask safety advisors to sort of walk around the premises and see where things are working well, where things are not working well. I think Anise pointed out that we will get things wrong. There's undoubtedly we will get things wrong, but as long as we constantly monitor what we're doing and say, okay, that doesn't seem to be working, why don't we change it? And that responsibility is on all of us. Again, it's about the thing I started with. We need to keep each other safe, and if we see something doesn't work, flag it up, and if we flag it up, we will deal with it. So I think, in terms of, as I said, in terms of escalation route, it's the standard line management escalation route.
Yeah, thanks, Nalan. And Charlene asked a question about whether the signage is going to alert colleagues to other issues with the wearing of face masks, such as the challenges for colleagues who lip read.
Yes, so there will be clear guidance on. Well, we're saying you shouldn't be challenging people who don't have a face mask, because I don't think it's fair if people who have reasons not to wear them, they can somebody can remind them, and if that's different entirely from somebody challenging anybody, but there will be clear guidance on this, where what the conditions are. People can't wear masks, and that will be shared with everybody, so people realize that there will be some people on the premises who won't be wearing a mask for specific reasons, and we don't need to sort of, you shouldn't be challenging those individuals. And if people require, we've also got guidance for people who have who require lip reading and so on, and we're trying to find technical solutions for this as well. So we know something like Google Transcribe works really well on your phones, and we're looking at that being used to sort of communicate. So basically I can hold my phone up and speak, and it will transcribe on what I'm saying. So there are various ways of doing that, and again, we will provide guidance on that. We're looking at it now.
Okay, and the last one I'll take now on signage is from, I think, from Caroline, who raises a concern about there being insufficient signage within buildings, and she suggests or asks whether we could provide some templates where local areas feel they could do with some additional signage. That seems like a good suggestion that we could take away and think about, Nalan.
Sure. We are going to increase the signage. So we had a meeting last week to talk this through, and so there will be increased signage coming through. But I will mention to Jamie about providing those templates locally, so they can be printed off locally and used if necessary.
Can I just add to that? I mean, Caroline's in BMH. We are working through building by building on a very detailed basis now, and obviously we'll do that ahead of Welcome Week starting next week. So Caroline's right, the signage isn't quite where we'd like it to be, but we are working through that, and we'll work through and increase that over the course of this week.
Okay, good. I'm gonna need to move on in a moment, so I'll take one or two more questions and before we finish this section. Helen's come back again on signage and the use of alternative languages, and asks whether we should maybe think about a QR code. We'll give that some thought offline, but I'm very clear in my own mind that students who come to study at the University of Manchester are expected to have proficient English language understanding to be able to fulfill their obligations when they're on campus. John Walker says, the last question, if someone isn't wearing a mask and I can't challenge them, can I remove myself from the vicinity? The short answer to that is yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I, before you finish, the other point
Yes,
is, it's very, very important, is I mean, and we'll have to have some flexibility on this from line managers, but, it's really important that if people are ill, they don't come onto campus under any circumstance, It's only fever. And unfortunately, we can't, at the beginning, we had very, very strict criteria about COVID. The more we've learned, the spectrum of illnesses are quite wide. So, even if you have upper respiratory infections, you should probably excuse yourself and then get tested, because that's what the advice is. Now, I know there's a problem with testing, but we're hoping it'll be resolved. But it's really, really important that people understand that. That applies to everyone. Just, if you're ill. Now, normally, people are used to coming, I've just got a cold, you'll say. But, in situations like that, you have to realize that that in a pandemic situation, the symptoms are very wide, and you need to be responsible and excuse yourself, get a test. If you're negative, then you can come back on. So that's very, very important. Yeah.
Very sound advice, Anis. Thank you for that. Steve Jordan reminds everyone that the signage has not yet been fully installed throughout the campus. So where you're seeing areas where you think there might be a gap, it could well be because we've not finished the installation just yet. And you'll have picked up on chat as well that Laura Caradona is the person in the library who's asking the question about charges. It's about car park charges. Diana, I'll come back to you when we do the Q&A after SEP to just talk about car park charges to address that question. So can I just thank Nalan and Anis on behalf of all of us this morning. Thank you both for your reassurance and for the confirmation of the amount of work that's gone in through your leadership and the work of colleagues right across the university to ensure that we do our level best to provide a COVID secure campus. in the coming year. Thank you both very much.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move on to our second presentation this morning, and that's from Simon, who's going to update us on the Student Experience Programme. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes. I've just got a couple of slides to accompany that. And what I thought I'd focus on is what's been happening during the so-called SEP pause that we've been in since lockdown started back in March. And despite there being a pause, and I use the word advisedly because quite a large number of colleagues have still been working to a greater or lesser extent on SEP, a huge amount has been achieved, and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to celebrate that and highlight it to you this morning. So in no particular order, in a few weeks' time, we will have completed the upgrade of Campus Solutions to the next version, Campus 9.2. This is a version that's now fully supported. This is one of the main drivers behind the programme in the first place in terms of moving us to the latest version of Campus Solutions. And what this will allow us to do is to deliver in a much more incremental way and with much more agility and flexibility the remaining technological components of SEP. And I'll come back to give an example of one of those a little bit later. So that's a very significant piece of work and removes a large amount of risk, both from the SEP programme, but also more broadly from our use of Campus Solutions. Just in time for the start of this year, and this was brought forward, so we did some quick replanning, some reprioritising. We've launched My Financials for students. So this is students access this through My Manchester. And this technology does a number, or this functionality, I should say, does a number of different things for students, but particularly allows them to see money that they are being invoiced for by the university for tuition fees, accommodation fees, allows them to check their balance, to set up direct debit payments. It allows them to ask for letters about, to give assurance that they're a member of the university, to go and apply for banking access, for instance, if you're an international student. And a number of those things are automated now through the process and through My Manchester. And as you see on the next bullet point, we've used some robotics technology. Robotics always conjures up images of sort of physical moving humanoid-like creatures, but this is merely an automated process that allows us to generate letters, for instance, to confirm that students are registered with us that they can then take to their banks. And we'll now be using that technology in a number of other areas of SEP. And as you see there as well, we've started using it for the bulk printing of student cards, which is going to help us to issue those in a COVID secure way at the start of the year. Can we move to the next slide, please? And it's not just technology. So some of the process changes that have been developed during SEP, and again, many of you will have contributed to some of the design of these a year or two ago, were used during the recent admissions process, issues that we had recently around confirmation and clearing, and an admissions process that felt like it kept on going forever and is almost at a conclusion now. But we used some of the new SEP process within that, and that allowed us to actually to get a far better view on a real-time basis of where we were from an admissions perspective than we might otherwise have been. Also during the pause, we've added into the scope of SEP the engagement monitoring project. This is being sponsored by Dan George, one of the Associate Vice Presidents for Teaching and Learning. And this is going to be a really important step forward, particularly this coming year, as we start to see this coming into play during the first part of this next semester. This is going to give us a sense across the university of how well our students are engaging with us. It's broader than merely looking at attendance data, and maybe we can talk about it in more detail at a future session, but it's a really, really important step forward for us in terms of just identifying some of those early triggers that might mean we might want to intervene with a particular student earlier than we would otherwise have done. We, before the pause, of course, we had updated you that we had made quite a bit of progress in terms of some of the thinking around the wider design and implications of how the process, people and technology components of what we were calling phase 2B come together. And we've made quite a bit of progress on those during this pause period. And this is particularly around those core elements that focus on supporting teaching and learning across the university. And of course, the recent voluntary severance scheme has allowed us to make quite significant progress, very significant progress, in fact, in terms of realising some of the anticipated financial benefits that SEP will bring. And almost all of those decisions around voluntary severance were made on the basis of some of the decisions we'd previously made with SEP and some of the direction of travel that had been identified through the many workshops that have taken place over the last couple of years. Final slide, please. And one thing that's really quite noticeable, this is a really positive benefit of working on a big programme like SEP. If you go back to confirmation and clearing, the gift that kept on giving this year, that necessarily brought together a huge virtual team across the university. And it was really, really evident that some of the relationships within that team were stronger than they'd ever been. Partly actually as a consequence of people, far more people working together in a virtual and real way on SEP over the last couple of years. It's really cemented some of those relationships. So that's a much bigger sort of positive impact than we might otherwise have imagined. And finally, we've also replanned the entire programme during this pause period, obviously to take account of the fact that we've had to step back a bit in terms of the intensity of what we've been able to do and deliver. And we've now got a firm plan in place that will allow us, as I hinted earlier on, in this campus upgrade, will see us starting to deliver elements of technology in little batches rather than doing a big bang approach. And a good example of that is a customer relationship management component of the programme, which we're now able to bring forward because it's now able to chunk it up into a more discrete package of work. And that's going to have huge benefits for us in the short term, particularly as we continue to work in this more virtual way. It'll allow us to record interactions between individual staff and students and to be able to see those across the university where appropriate. So again, we're looking to bring that forward. And with all of that in mind and having completed that replanning, by the middle of October, we will be issuing some far more detailed communications about the remainder of the programme and some specific details about the timeframes of each of the elements, both process technology and the remaining kind of organisational design elements, and indeed how we start to make the most of some of these changes. And that detail, as I say, will be available by the middle of October. So look out for that, and to take any questions a little bit later. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Simon. I'm going to turn now to Richard Cotton for a brief update on the huge amount of work that he's been leading on to help secure flights into Manchester Airport for our international students. Richard, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Patrick. So this is the work that we've been doing with part of a group that we set up with other GM universities and other organisations. Other GM universities and other organisations in Manchester, looking at the experience of international students as they arrive in the city. One of the constraints that we've got at the moment is that the Chinese government have really there's a very low limit on the number of scheduled flights coming in, and I know a number of universities have been looking at charter options. I think there aren't any sort of successful charter options other than the one that we've managed to pull together, and that's partly because the costs of underwriting, the commercial costs for underwriting a charter are quite high, and it's been difficult to get agreement amongst universities. So we took a slightly different approach, which was to work across a number of universities in the north of England to survey on student preferences and to sort of build the case for a commercial opportunity. So we've been working with the Manchester China Forum and Hainan Airlines for flights coming into Manchester Airport. So we've now got permission for 100 flights starting from the 21st of September, working through the sort of permissions process for with the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we're hoping to confirm those bookings to students from China in the next day or so. We've also been working as part of that GM group on opportunities for students coming through from India. So we've managed to get an agreement with BA for a preferential rates, including baggage allowance for students coming in, which make a huge difference in terms of conversion for students. So what we're seeing at the moment with students from China is that the desire to come to the UK is still quite high, but there's obviously this barrier on flights, which hopefully we've managed to remove.
Great, that's very helpful, Richard, and thanks for all your hard work on that. Okay, so now's your opportunity to ask any questions in relation to SEP, or anything else you've heard today, or anything we've not covered that you'd like us to cover before we finish today. And if you'd like to put a blue hand up as well as the chat function, that would be great. It saves time if I don't have to read the question out on the chat function. So nothing yet. Okay, so first question, Richard, is the flight offer for freshers only?
No, so that'll be available for all students. Unfortunately, it won't be available for example, members of staff who are looking to return who are in China. It's a closed charter, which is only, the permissions are only for students travelling. Okay,
good. Diana, do you want to answer the question about car park charges?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Yeah, as everyone will be aware, there was an announcement before lockdown of an increase in the charges for parking across the campus. But since lockdown, the barriers have been up for most of the car parks, allowing mainly our NHS colleagues to park in our car parks. As people are returning to campus in numbers, we were getting complaints that they couldn't get into our car parks. So most of the barriers are now down. The Booth Street multi-storey car park is now open. So we're going to reinstigate the parking charges at the existing rate, not the revised rate, for people who have permits. We are aware that quite a number of people who are on the waiting list and who may need to get into campus. So we have opened up applications for the 21 hit card. That will be charged at £53, and it allows 21 parking incidents before you need to renew that. So anybody who wants to apply for that can apply at the car parking office. They should be open, I think, this week, because we've been waiting to get the screens and everything up. So that should be open very soon. So people who come in infrequently, those people, preference will be given to those people who can't use public transport or have disabilities or other reasons they need to come in their car rather than on public transport. So that will be open now for people to apply for those 21 hit cards. The permit charging will be reviewed again in January, but for the time being it will be the current charges.
Yeah, and so in response to Debbie and Laura, £53 is the new rate for the pay-as-you-go 21 hit card. So it's about £2.60 per day to park, which by any stretch of the imagination is a very low charge for car parking. Okay, Simon, John Walker is asking about accessibility issues in relation to SEP on the engagement monitoring element of the project. Do you want to respond?
For people watching online, John's concern is that he believes it wasn't taken seriously enough with the engagement monitoring project. I mean, John, you're absolutely right. Accessibility in terms of a digital experience is absolutely imperative. And in fact, there are certain legal obligations on us in that regard. So it absolutely needs to be front and centre. I'd welcome a discussion with you offline about some of the issues you've seen or believe you've seen in the other project.
Okay, good. In advance of the call today, we had a lot of questions about the home versus work balance in the future for professional services colleagues, particularly, and whether we would shift from a presumption that people will work on campus and then ask for flexibility to work off campus. I think that the short answer is yes, there will be a significant shift. There will be a whole new approach to a blended way of working. In the way we talk about blended and flexible learning, our new approach will be a blended and flexible approach to where you work that will be based on the nature and value of the work that you're doing and where it can be best undertaken. So I think this is, as I said at the outset, going to be a significant component of what our new normal will look like in the future. I can see that many colleagues will have an approach where they spend some time on campus and some time working from home. In the more immediate term, of course, we will continue to want colleagues to work from home where that can facilitate socially distanced arrangements on campus for teaching and for other activities. Okay, are there any other questions today? We've got a few minutes left. No, if there aren't, then I'm going to thank you all very much for your time again this morning. I hope that this new approach of having a topic-led open meeting, which you've suggested to us in the past, has worked. And please do continue to send us in your suggestions for those topics that you think we should include on future open meetings. Thank you again for your time this morning. Keep well and keep safe. And thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.